The Patriots and the Broncos may be the two worst offenses heading into the season, but there's still a few players on the rosters that could have big fantasy impact this year. We dig into the fantasy outlook for Patriots, Rhamondre Stevenson, Broncos, Javonte Williams, and Marvin Mims on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com. Latest fantasy article up that you can check out is my sleeper for every team in the NFL. So 32 teams, 32 sleepers. Check it out. Might discuss that a little bit on the show here at some point, I'm sure, as we get for draft prep here. But welcome. End of July, almost August here. So can't wait to get the draft season started.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Vinny, we're at our final episode for our team segments, going through each team and all of their fantasy impact this year for all of their players. We have two teams left, but we're putting them together because it's the Patriots and the Broncos. And I'm sorry, they just do not have enough fantasy relevant players to each get their own episode. But we're going to finish it off with these two teams because there's still players we need to discuss that will have an impact. So these teams are kind of similar in the way that they had struggling offenses last year. The Patriots much more so. They were 30th in fantasy points per game last year. The Broncos did keep Sean Payton as their head coach while the Patriots moved on from Bill Belichick after 24 seasons. But they both traded away their starting. Well, I shouldn't say traded away. I guess the Broncos released Russell Wilson while the Patriots traded away Mac Jones to the Jaguars. So both lost their starting quarterbacks. They both drafted a quarterback in round one. Drake Maye goes to the Patriots 3rd overall. Bo Nix goes to the Broncos 12th overall. The Patriots signed Jacoby Brissett to compete with Drake Maye at quarterback, and then the Broncos traded for Zach Wilson for whatever reason, and they still have Jarrett Stidham to compete with Bo Nix to start the season at quarterback. Both have less than desirable group of receivers to throw to, especially the Patriots. I mean, you're looking at some rookies, Jalen Polk, he was drafted in the 2nd round, Javon Baker, 4th round, and then you have Kendrick Bourne coming off a torn ACL, Demario Douglas, who led the team last year with like no yards at all, but it was a 6th round pick last year. KJ Osborne they brought in. They still have Juju Smith-Schuster, but really maybe Hunter Henry is like the top option there for a receiver. And then the Broncos, they still have Cortland Sutton, but they traded away Jerry Jeudy to Cleveland this offseason. They have Marvin Mims, who they drafted in the 2nd round last year, but refused to use him. They brought in Josh Reynolds. They drafted Troy Franklin, who is Bo Nix's teammate. And then Tim Patrick is coming back, but he's torn an ACL and then torn Achilles in back-to-back seasons. So don't know what to expect from him. Let's start with the quarterback conversation. I don't think any of these quarterbacks we're going to want so much in fantasy, but who do you think will start and who do you want to be the starter in terms of fantasy points for the rest of the players on the team?
First, I'm going to say, Michelle, my head is just spinning based on all that information you gave me about all these teams, and I wasn't excited about any of those names you mentioned. I'll start with that, and that's why we probably are mashing these teams up to one show. But I also did an article kind of projecting how I thought these training camp battles would go, and it really comes down to, is there another option the coach trusts and the offensive coordinator? And you look at the Patriots, Jacoby Brissett, he's, again, that gun for hire, so to speak. Like, you just put him into any offense. He's pretty smart. He's a little bit mobile. He can throw downfield, and we've seen it. He's been a good backup to Tua. He's been a good backup in Cleveland, and I'm going to start there because he has some history here in this style of offense. It's Alex Van Pelt taking over, so it's going to be different. I mean, they're going to be pretty run-heavy. We know that's how the Browns have operated. The Patriots also have a pretty good defense. And the Patriots, I might not be thinking that they think that they're going to stink as much as they will here with Drake Maye taking over for Bill Belichick. I don't think they're going to be very good, but they think they're probably going to win because they have some good defensive players. I'm not going to cut them short on that part of the ball. So what are they going to do with that to complement what's their best avenue? Running the ball, being efficient, protecting the ball. And they're going to try to win games as much as possible. Now, I don't think it's going to add up to a lot of wins, but that tells me early out of the gate, Jacoby Brissett is the better choice right now with all the factors here. And they also might think we're not going to win all that much. And that also is against Drake Maye because they don't want to throw him out there and take the lumps here as they've had an offensive line in transition as well. So when you look at all that, I think Brissett starts there. And you look at the competition in Denver. We've already seen Jared Stidham. He's terrible. Like, he should not be out there starting. He only started last year, as I wrote, because he was not named Russell Wilson. That was the only reason Sean Payton put him out there, just to spite Russell Wilson. He wasn't trying to evaluate him. And then you bring in Zach Wilson. He's just a guy, resurrection project, right? So Bo Nix has got a very clear path to starting. And I think you also look at his Bo Nix skill set, the accuracy, throwing the ball out quickly, can execute an offense if you go run heavy and try to win games that way. And this offensive line, as Michelle's pointed out before, very good run blocking grade. They were very inefficient in running last year. I think they could take some hits up front with Lloyd Cushenberry gone. But overall, I think I'm going to go Nix and Brissett. So I guess it comes to be that conversation. And maybe we're more looking at Nix or Maye down the line, right? Not to begin of the season, but maybe will any of them retain some value later in the season when they're kind of settled in and started.
Yeah, it's really hard not to see Jacoby Brissett start for the Patriots. And I think that's the best way to go if we want any of these guys to break out for fantasy in terms of Jalen Polk, having a breakout year as a rookie.
Yep.
I think his best bet is Brissett. We've seen him now really make guys pretty good in fantasy. I mean, it was such a small sample size, but whenever Brissett stepped on the field instead of Sam Howell last year, Terry McLaurin would have a huge play. It was like all he needed was someone to just trust him and throw up the ball, and that's what Brissett did. We saw Amari Cooper be very good with Brissett in Cleveland in 2022. It's like he can make players good. So I think Brissett, in terms of fantasy points for the rest of the team, very good. Brissett still is not like a fantasy option you want to go for. And yeah, I don't see a reason not to start Bo Nix for the Broncos. You just have no other options. I mean, they kind of let themselves in this position. So I'll say, if you were to take a shot late on Drake Maye or Bo Nix in a 2-quarterback league, because if you're in a 2-quarterback league, you're drafting 3 quarterbacks, right? Like, you need a backup to your 2. And in that case, if you're playing in a 12-team league, that's 36 quarterbacks that are going to be drafted. These 2 guys are going to go. I would prefer to go on the Bo Nix side just because I think he's going to play more. He has Sean Payton, which Russell Wilson had plenty of good. Russell Wilson was good last year. Let's just get that out of the way. There's no reason that he got benched, but he also had plenty of good fantasy weeks. Bo Nix is not going to be close to what Russell Wilson was, but I still prefer him and his playmakers he has around him than to Drake Maye, who I really don't think will be playing all that much this year until maybe he gets a shot mid-season if Brissett just playing terribly.
Yeah, you just add up all the weapons and going down the line. We talked about Michelle introduced them all. But yeah, Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims has some upside. Sutton has not been talked about much in a trade. There were some rumors, but I think they moved on because Judy is the guy that they were able to deal instead to Cleveland. So they have some weapons there, and Greg Dulcich and Adam Troutman, you can't totally forget about them. They also have some pretty good receiving backs between Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine and Jaleel McLaughlin. If they use him in that kind of role as well, then there's some good options here. And the line is not bad. You have Garrett Bowles. You've got the guys they picked up last year, McGlinchey and Powers. So they're going to keep Bo Nix upright, and he's going to get the ball out quickly, get the hands on the balls of these playmakers. Mims can make some big plays after the catch. Sutton is a big guy in that Mike Evans, Mike Williams vein, who can go up and get the ball in the red zone and also stretch the field at times. So when you look at this array of weapons, there's at least some established player here, right? You don't have anybody in the New England system that you would trust in the same way. Kendrick Bourne doesn't do it for me. So when you look at it, yeah, Bo Nix also could have more starting experience at some point by midseason to be more valuable than Drake Maye. So I'm not going nuts because, again, Nix is going to give you limited rushing. I'm not going to say it's 0 because both Nix and Maye are pretty athletic. It's not going to be 0. There's going to be some opportunities to take off. It's certainly not going to be like Drew Brees level 0. But I look at Nix, I think you're right. He's going to have some value at some point. And I don't think he's going to be a total flop here in the NFL. I think if you surround him with the right guys, I think he can be really effective. And then one other factor that Michelle mentioned, the Troy Franklin thing that's going on, that if Franklin can get on the field with Nix, and he's got a familiar target he knows really well, they're best friends, roommates, all that good stuff. So there could be some nice rookie chemistry developing there as a number 3 receiver.
Yeah, we'll definitely hit on Troy Franklin later on in the show. I want to talk about the running backs next because Rhamondre Stevenson, actually, I mean, we have to make a decision about him. He's going pretty early.
Yeah.
He could be a huge, huge impact. We know he has high upside. We've seen it before. So we're going to get into Rhamondre Stevenson and also hit on Javonte Williams in our next segment. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. It's the fastest-growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So last year for Rhamondre Stevenson, it was a pretty disappointing year, right? He finishes as a running back 35 overall. He missed 5 games, but still even points per game, running back 31 in points per game last year, 10.5 points per game. But the season prior, he was running back 11 overall, running back 14 in points per game. And also he did start to get going at the end of last year before he got hurt. But even if you just take out his week 13 game last year when he got hurt, he was averaging 11.3 points per game from weeks 1 through 12. That would have put him around running back 24 on points per game in a season. So again, it still would have been disappointing, but not as bad as it looked at the end of the year. Right now, his cost is running back 18, 61 overall. He's going around guys like Alvin Kamara and Aaron Jones and David Montgomery. I actually think he's a really nice value right now, considering like each of the last 2 years, a running back has led this offense in receptions, with Ezekiel Elliott doing last year. He's now gone. And then Stevenson doing it the year prior. Like I just think Stevenson is such a safe running back to get so many targets in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I like Stevenson's running a little bit more than his receiving. And Antonio Gibson, we can't totally forget about him because he's a converted receiver. And I think there's a reason they picked him up, right, to replace Elliott. He went back to the Cowboys. They knew that they were kind of hurting at wide receiver. They didn't have a lot. So Gibson might end up being busy in that old throwback role to the Kevin Falk days, the James White days. So they haven't really had a type of back that could be designated. I think Stevenson had some potential there, but they needed Stevenson to transition to being a power back, lead back, because he was their best option. And they did give a contract here, so they do like him. And that means they need to run him a little bit more. I think a lot of Stevenson's issues last year, just the team didn't give him a lot of opportunities. It wasn't a very scary offense overall. So when you're a very good running back in a really bad offense, the really bad offense can take over and drag you down, and eventually brought him down with attrition. So I think, yeah, he's one of the better, like you mentioned that RB24 when he was all put together and getting going. That's an RB2, and that's what you're looking at right now. He's RB18. He's not exciting, but look at the players around him. Kenneth Walker I like better. Aaron Jones is a good debate behind him. Alvin Kamara, we know with his injury issues, I think that's pretty tight there between him and Stevenson. But there are some values I like later. Najee Harris, Zamir White. There's some people I might target. So Stevenson, I think what worries me most is this offense in general. How many scoring opportunities is he going to get? And Gibson, I want to see what Gibson's role is, kind of camp, preseason. If I get an indication from beat writers and all that Gibson is going to be kind of a dedicated pass catcher, and you're going to have Stevenson playing maybe 2.5 down backs. That's what I'm looking at here from Stevenson. He's going to see some third downs because he's good at pass protecting, but he could come out in certain situations where Stevenson is kind of on the bench, but Gibson is helping their wide receivers. So a little bit concerned there. Versus like an Aaron Jones right now, there's not much competition in Minnesota for the key touches here, so I might be more inclined to get him or Kenneth Walker, where I'm not as worried about Charbonnet behind him. So it's tough. It's really tough. I wouldn't call this the dead zone. This is the confusing, frustrating zone of running backs, and I think Stevenson falls right into that as an RB2.
Definitely the biggest worry would be the touchdowns. I will say if Jacoby Brissett wins the job like we expect him to, and he keeps it for most of the year, like I feel much better about Stevenson then. Yeah. They're still going to be a below average offense. They would probably I want to put them above 20 points per game, like scoring offense. But at the same time, if it's Drake Maye, they could be the worst scoring offense. I mean, they were last year with Mac Jones, but I just think Brissett would at least give him more opportunities to score a few more rushing touchdowns on the season. But so you're more worried about Antonio Gibson than I am. But if you do think he's going to get a good amount of the receiving work, and we expect them to be losing a decent amount of games and being down, are you open to drafting Antonio Gibson in full PPR leagues later in drafts? Because right now, he's going right around Chuba Hubbard, Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, like around a lot of rookies. Would you feel better about taking Antonio Gibson in PPR leagues?
Yeah, I mean, he would have some value. I really don't like to go that route. And another guy that I'm thinking about in the same way, another converted wide receiver, Tyrone Tracy Jr., the rookie from the Giants, where you look at Devin Singletary is not the best pass catcher, and Stevenson's okay. I don't know exactly what I'm going to get from Gibson. And again, it's a mishmash. Unfortunately, it's the double-edged sword here where it's like not a lot of clear-cut answers and too many people like mucking it up, right? There's all kinds of tight ends and receivers and short area, and Demario Douglas is pretty much an extended handoff short area guy, and it's just very crowded and messy. So I wouldn't say I'm going to target Gibson. I might be intrigued if I hear a little bit more. But, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for someone that could buy you a flex week with some standalone value, who'd be the guy? The other guys are more lottery ticket types, especially Lloyd, Wright, Kimani Vidal, all those rookies, waiting for things to kind of fall into place there on their depth charts to have any value.
And then with Javonte Williams, he's going as running back 31 cost right now, 97th overall. Last season wasn't pretty. Running back 30 overall, but running back 34 in points per game. He averaged the same amount of points per game as Deonta Foreman averaged last year, which I was actually shocked it was even that bad. But he does. I mean, he has a pretty crowded backfield in the way it's like these guys are going to be involved. Jaleel McLaughlin, like we know he's going to get some receiving work, or Samaje Perine. Like maybe both won't make the team. Maybe one of them gets cut, but like Perine's going to be involved, or McLaughlin is. And then they added Audric Estime later in the draft, but like Estime's a really good running back. He was really good at Notre Dame. He ran a slow 40, which made him fall in drafts, kind of like a Kyron Williams did for the same team, which was weird. But I like Audric Estime. I think he's going to be involved as well. Javonte Williams, he hasn't come through with the excitement he was supposed to have coming out of school. His efficiency last year was terrible. Now, he was coming off a torn ACL from 2022, so maybe he gets it back this year, but he never really had it. Like, what is he going to get back? It's not like we've ever seen him dominate in this league. So, again, on an offense, we don't expect him to score many. An offense, we don't expect to score many points, to give him too many rushing touchdown opportunities. He only had 3 rushing touchdowns last year. Like, I'm out on Javonte Williams.
Yeah, I'm actually intrigued. And here's why, because I don't love those running backs in that range that we're talking about in the previous spot here. I don't think you're going to get much return on investment there. But you look at this group here, this is not the frustrating kind of zone, but it's kind of, I'm going to pay attention to this zone. Jonathan Brooks, if he's healthy, he's going to go and be effective. Devin Singletary, whether we like it or not, is going to be the lead back for the Giants, and he put together some good games last year. Brian Robinson Jr., I think his role is going to be pretty good here, playing with Jaden Daniels. So I look at Javonte Williams. I think this is also more that a couple things. Estime is banged up, so he's going to get a little bit behind in training camp, unfortunately. He looked okay. McLaughlin is tiny. They can't keep him out there for too long. And Perine has been rumored to be cut. So these things could actually start lining up for Javonte Williams a little bit more. And he's a decent receiver. And I think this guy's kind of had a weird fantasy life. We've been like hyping him up big time. We thought he was going to break out and do damage. And then he got his knee injury, and then we were a bit off him. Then we were worried about him, and then he underwhelmed. So I think he's still talented, and maybe it's just me. I can't quit this guy in terms of the talent, much like Sean Payton loves Jaleel McLaughlin. I think Javonte Williams can be a special back. Maybe it's not in Denver. Maybe he has to move on to a different situation to produce. So I don't know. I'm not going to totally quit him. And he's so cheap at this point. Like, I can potentially get a running back that's going to see 15 to 18 touches at the 31 cost. And the same thing with Singletary, Brooks, Robinson. These are some guys that are going to touch the ball quite a bit on their team. I just think people are just scared by these uncertain situations. Well, you know what? That is an opportunity to take advantage of. Like, when people are doing that, that's when you want to kind of pounce and get that value. And if you're playing, I don't want to call it a strategy, but if you're playing a little bit of zero RB gamesmanship here at one point in your draft, these are the guys to target, I would think.
Yeah, I'm always going to go with more upside. Like, I just don't see any upside with Javonte Williams at all. Like, maybe he can outscore his ADP of running back 30 or 34. Where's he at? 31 right now. Yeah, but I just don't see him having any upside. I would go with Jonathan Brooks, even though he might miss some time to start. Like, I just think his upside when he's back is so much higher than Javonte Williams that I would go that route. Now we have to jump into all the receivers because there's a lot of receivers to talk about. And we have to figure out one of them. Some of them are going to contribute. We just got to figure out which ones. So we'll hop into that to finish off the Broncos and the Patriots in our final segment.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors knows this and has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With more than 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and take home those huge wins with your ride. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right. To Michelle, I will kind of yield to you. We'll talk about the wide receivers on these teams. I'm not excited at all. I might be out on all of them, but I'll let you go to help me and our listeners and viewers if they have a thought about these guys, what they should do.
Yeah, so this is the thing with Courtland Sutton. So last year he finishes as wide receiver 35 overall. And then wide receiver 36 in points per game, right? And Courtland Sutton's the biggest name out of these two groups by far. And you might think, okay, they sent out Jerry Jeudy. He could get even more targets. But the thing is, he scored 10 receiving touchdowns last year. 10. And he finished as a wide receiver 35 overall. Like, how do you still finish that low with double-digit touchdowns? And he doesn't have Russell Wilson anymore. And I don't know what Sean Payton had against Russell Wilson, but he's putting this whole blame on this failure from last year on him when, like, Russ throws touchdowns. That's what he does. He had 26 and 15 games last year, and that's supposed to be a bad year. Like, I'm sorry, I don't think Bo Nix is throwing even 20. Like, I don't think he's getting close to Russell Wilson threw last year. Courtland Sutton has never been a touchdown scorer prior to last season. I think he goes back to struggling scoring touchdowns again. He had four career touchdowns four touchdowns from 2020 to 2022 before breaking off for 10 this last year. I can't imagine drafting him. I know he's cheap, wide receiver 46, but what's his upside? And he's going around other rookies that at least can give you something. Or Jackson Smith-Njigba, maybe he breaks out in year 2. Or you get the wide receiver 1 possibly for the Bills and Ken Coleman, or possibly the wide receiver 1 for the Jaguars and Brian Thomas Jr. I'm going for that upside instead of taking a guy that, you know, is going to be a wide receiver 3 at best, somewhere in the 30s to 40 range.
Yeah, this is why I like the running backs a lot on these teams, because these receivers just don't inspire. And Cortland Sutton, we've been hyped about. I really thought when Russell Wilson came, this was going to be his boy. And Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy were going to be part 2 of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. That did not happen at all. That was just wishful thinking on my part. But you're right. The neon light is flashing for Jackson Smith-Njigba, Coleman, Thomas, even Jameson Williams going as some upside there as a young receiver who can stretch a field. But Cortland Sutton is just one of those picks you throw out and you're just bored. Like, okay, I guess I'll take Cortland Sutton. He's the Broncos' #1 receiver, so I'm going to take him. No, don't be fooled into that. I mean, and I think it might be the same kind of tune for the Patriots. Oh, this guy's the #1 receiver on his team. I'm going to take him. No, that's not a way you look at it. You're looking at where is his path to production, as Michelle was pointing out. Is he going to get the touchdowns? No, he's not going to get these touchdowns. He's going to be big play dependent. And he's got a history of major durability issues staying on the field. So, and look, and they've been so fickle about him too. They wanted to dump Jerry Jeudy. They finally got a taker in the Browns. They wanted to move Sutton. The problem is probably no one was willing to give them all that much for Sutton because he's getting paid too much for being a below average receiver that can't stay on the field and doesn't do much except use his body to score. So, yeah, I'm out on Cortland Sutton. I mean, maybe you can convince me to go after some of the deeper sleepers on the Patriots and Broncos, but Michelle, no, I can't buy it.
Yeah, and that's what. So there's 4 wide receivers across the Broncos and Patriots that are going in a 5-spot range of wide receivers. So Demario Douglas, wide receiver 72. He's the most expensive of this group. Jalen Polk, wide receiver 74. Troy Franklin, the rookie for the Broncos, wide receiver 75. And Marvin Mims, wide receiver 77. Rank those 4 guys for me because I'm actually pretty interested in if Jacoby Brissett's the starter. I'm actually pretty interested in second-round rookie Jalen Polk for the Patriots because he's that big play guy. He doesn't need a bunch of targets. He averaged 17 yards per reception at Washington over the last 3 seasons. That was the 4th most in the FBS. He had 12 receptions of 30-plus yards in 2023. That was tied for the 6th most in the Power 5. Like, he's a big play guy. Jacoby Brissett will throw up the ball to him. I'm most interested in him, and then it would go Marvin Mims, then Troy Franklin, and then Demario Douglas, who's the most expensive of this group, would actually be my last one. He led the team last year in receiving yards. He didn't do anything ever. I have zero desire. He would need too much volume for him to matter.
Yeah, I played Demario Douglas a few times last year. I'm not proud of it, but I needed a wide receiver 3 in half-point PPR, and he gave me like 8 points that I needed, right? I was desperate, and I put him in there, but do I want any more than 8 points? Yes. And I want to look for that in general out of my guy. But I'm a big fan of Jalen Polk as well. If you look at that Washington pecking order from last year, I mean, it was loaded. I mean, Rhamondre and Joe McMillan were also drafted, but what was their kind of pecking order? Rhamondre was the alpha, did all the big time producing, and Jalen Polk was their field stretcher, as Michelle mentioned. So I think he's special, and he looks like he could be starting here with Kendrick Bourne on the outside and Douglas by default inside, but Douglas has more competition outside. They have the other rookie, Javon Baker. They've got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's a big slot. They got the tight ends in the middle of the field. So Javon Baker, they don't have anyone like him. They moved on from Devontae Parker, who was mediocre at best at stretching the field. So now you got a guy that has got some speed, some wheels, and can maybe do some things on the outside, separate a little bit, make some plays. So, yeah, I'm excited about Jalen Polk. It may not all come together this year, but I'm definitely intrigued at wide receiver 74. Now, I'm having a hard time, though, with the Broncos guys because Marvin Mims, I've been a big Mims fan. He was a really good guy in terms of the return ability. He went to all-pro status there. So get this guy the ball in his hands. He's dynamic. Punt returns, kickoff returns. Let's
just get him the ball. But also let him on the field. He ran just 245 routes last year. It was 19th among rookies. Like, no, he was a 2nd-round pick, 63rd overall.
That was very confusing to me because, I mean, they were like so hyping him. Like Sean Payton said, "Oh, we love Marvin Mims," and every week is like, he's making plays. Let's get him involved. And then we look at the box score. Where's Marvin Mims? Where are the snap counts with Marvin Mims? So every week, so commit to it, Sean Payton. Give him some opportunities. I love this guy at Oklahoma. He just made big plays. And again, these teams need big plays at wide receivers. And you look at Polk can do that. And I think this guy could do that as well, stretching the field, just given an opportunity. Troy Franklin, I like the fact that he's had the connection with Nix, but he's a rookie. So I would go Mims. I would really look at Polk and Mims. If I was desperate later, I would look at Douglas and Franklin. But I say guys that could actually produce this year and maybe not stashes. I think Polk and Mims have the highest upside of this group, and that's where I would go. And not interested in these other guys.
I really like
Yeah.
Troy Franklin coming out of school. My biggest worry is he's a 4th round rookie, right? We'll see if he can, how much playing time he'll have, but he had the 4th most receiving yards in the Power 5 over the last 2 seasons, behind only Roma Dunze, Malik Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison Jr., who all went top 9 in this draft. And then Troy Franklin fell to the 4th for whatever reason. Like, he's fast, he's big, he's skinny, I guess. That's his biggest knock, is skinniness. But I really like Troy Franklin. I hope he gets a shot. I won't be surprised if he has a nice rookie season, but a little too risky to be taking him in your drafts. Now, we got to talk about Hunter Henry here to close up the show, because he's super low cost, tight end 18. Last year, he's tight end 17, overall tight end 15 in points per game. He had such a weird season, though, because he had 4 weeks as a top 3 fantasy tight end last year. That was the same amount of top 3 weeks as Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce had. It's just the rest of Hunter Henry's weeks were like pointless. So that was the difference, right? Like, he was tight end 1, tight end 2 in weeks 1 and 2. And then the last 2 weeks of the season, he played tight end 3, tight end 3. And then he missed the last few games with a knee injury. He led the team in receiving touchdowns. He could easily lead this team in targets and receiving touchdowns again. It's just, is he worth drafting? Is he worth that, flyer pick? He's going around K. Dotton, Chiga Conquo, Isaiah Likely. Like, is that the guy you go for late in your drafts if you need a second tight end?
Well, let's quickly looking at the other receivers. I mean, Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster, KJ Osborne. These guys could all cancel each other out, right? As okay, they're okay veterans. Polk and Douglas are young, right? Who's got the most experience producing? And we also know this is an Alex Van Pelt offense that can use the tight end. We've seen things happen here in Cleveland with David Njoku. And Hunter Henry is just very talented. I feel really bad for this guy because he was going to be rolling here into the Justin Herbert territory. He had a really good year initially with Mac Jones. He was scoring those touchdowns, but then just fizzled. So I am intrigued by Hunter Henry. I just wish he was in a better situation. This is, again, another good situation for the sleepers. We talked about K. Dotton, Isaiah Likely, Chiga Conquo, Ben Sennett. These are a lot of guys that you're looking at that could really be valuable here as 2 tight end leagues in Superflex, Premium, whatever. You could look at Hunter Henry. So I don't think it's a bad thought to think of him being a key target here. I mean, Jacoby Brissett, he threw a lot to the tight end, and rookies tend to throw a lot to the tight end. So Hunter Henry is definitely the other interesting receiver other than Jalen Polk for me.
Yeah, I might, I can't quit Hunter Henry. There's something about him.
He's so
But
good.
even if he's not a guy you draft, like, he's going to be a streaming option this year. We'll be talking about him throughout the season. Obviously, we need Brissett in there, I think, over Drake Maye. Again, Brissett's just better for fantasy in terms of these playmakers in New England. That is it for today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're going to be back tomorrow talking about all the top storylines coming out of training camp that will impact our fantasy season. It'll be a fun episode. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.